It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Patriots of Act 746 are on a mission to educate the people of Arkansas about your Second Amendment rights, specifically your gun rights here in Arkansas, your Arkansas constitutional rights when it comes to the Second Amendment, specifically constitutional carry, the concept of permitless carry as well. And you can check them out on Facebook. Go to facebook.com, search for Patriots of Act 746, and ask to be a member of the group. Join the online sensation today. Here to talk more about this growing group, Patriots of Act 746, we have Mr. John Calvin Martin with us. John, welcome to the program.
Good morning, my friend.
I really appreciate, we had a conversation earlier or yesterday, and so I really appreciate getting to know you. I appreciate that you're willing to come on the program. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your interactions with the Patriots of Act 746 and how you first became aware of this organization.
Yes, sir. I guess my first interaction through them was knowing the Jan Morgan platform when she was running for governor. I got introduced to several of the Patriot members then and just absolutely fell in love with them because they were just down-to-earth, normal people. You know, a lot of times when we hear about these Facebook groups, we think they're radicals or extremists or whatever, and these Patriots of Act 746 guys are just good American, red-blooded American people. And, man, I just fell in love with those guys because they have the same kind of mindset that I do. You know, I just love my country. I want my country back. I want it to be what it was when I was growing up. And unfortunately, my kids don't know the America that I know. Or that I knew growing up, you know.
Specifically, John, though, were you aware of the decriminalization of firearms in the state of Arkansas according to what the law says before you ran into the Patriots group? No,
sir. And that's the thing that really, if I can say, embarrassed me as much, because I've always considered myself a Patriot American, you know, red-blooded again. As I said, I love the flag and everything America stands for or used to stand for. And so when I ran into these Patriots of Act 746 members, I was blown away on my own ignorance. I didn't realize that I had been duped, if I could put it that way, because growing up through the educational system and listening to the news, the mainstream media, I just took it for granted that my government was taking care of me, when actually that's not the case at all. And the more you study, when you start looking into the Constitution, you realize, whoa, we are far from where we ought to be as far as what our founding fathers wanted us to be. You know, and that's one of the things I love about the chapter that I'm a part of here, Southeast Arkansas. We've got chapters all over the state, so they're easy to get to, and just good, normal. Let me stress that, normal people. You know.
Well, tell us, John, about the Southeast Arkansas chapter and what you guys are hoping to accomplish.
Well, we're down here in the southeast corner of the state, and again, we're kind of feeling a cutoff down here because we're not as connected with Little Rock as we would like to be, and sometimes we feel there's a mentality down here that you kind of get cut off, and so we're trying to educate this part of the country on our constitutional rights, specifically the Second Amendment and constitutional carry, because Arkansas is a constitutional carry state. And so we're pushing nothing crazy or radical, but our normal rights. And unfortunately, Paul, you know, a lot of times we get the word rights and the word privileges confused. We think they're the same. And they are by no means the same. My right to protect my family is not a privilege. That is a God-given, inalienable right. And I have that right whether anybody likes it or not. And again, not to infringe on anyone else's rights. But when someone comes in to harm my family or my property, then I have the right to defend that. And again, that's a God-given right.
I appreciate what you said about how you kind of felt like you'd been misled by the media when it comes to the Second Amendment and the rights that you have here in Arkansas now. It does seem that we've been conditioned to treat the Second Amendment different than we treat a lot of the other rights that we have. let's just take the Fourth Amendment, to be secure in your papers, your property. You don't have to have a license to have a right to privacy, but yet we think that you have to have a license to own a firearm or to keep a firearm, and the left wants to take it much further than that. But the idea that if you want to conceal carry, you have to have a permission slip. But right now, the Attorney General had an opinion that was very, very flawed, but she admitted in the first sentence, she said, there is no penalty in the law. There's no penalty in the law for carrying a concealed handgun without a permit. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly right. I think, and again, it's the way, we were raised and the little subtle things that we've been taught, that if someone carries open or concealed in Arkansas, that they must be a radical. They must be somebody that's an extremist, when actually that's just being an American. That's just being an Arkansasian now, because that's our right. And again, in my thinking, if you start breaking down, I've done a little bit of studying on this, the difference in a privilege and a right, and actually that argument goes back into the 1700s. So it is actually, that's one of the arguments that our country was founded on.
Really?
Is it a right or is it a privilege? A privilege, by Webster's definition, is a certain entitlement to immunity granted by the state or another authority to a restricted group. Well, that in itself doesn't make sense to me. And by contrast, a right is an inerrant, irrevocable entitlement held by all citizens of all human beings. So a right is something everybody has. Well, I have a right to protect myself.
Well, so that would contradict. The governor has said that he's called it a Second Amendment privilege before, and then it's reported that he said rights and privileges. It's the same thing. It's a synonym, basically.
Right.
And
they're 180 degrees apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you think of the fact that a right applies to everybody, well, specifically in the context of the Second Amendment, they're looking at it like it is a privilege, because you've got to check in with the government in order to be able to exercise this privilege. That's what we have allowed the Second Amendment to become, and I think it's it's a societal issue. It's an education issue. You have a lot of people that are terrified of guns. Now maybe not so many in Arkansas, but you do have some. You see somebody sees a gun, and they don't look at it as a tool. They look at it as a death instrument, and that's because we're not around them as much as we used to be. And so you do have to overcome that. Some people, they definitely have irrational fears, and we've just got to, hopefully, with logic and rational thinking, can dispel some of this.
Exactly, and that's what we do with the Patriots of Act 746. We're not about pushing people into something they don't like. We're about trying to educate people into something they don't know, because there is a whole generation that's been raised, that's come up, that actually just don't know the Constitution, and we are absolutely 100% Constitution driven. It amazes me, Paul, how people will overlook the Second Amendment, but stand on the top of the house and scream the First Amendment, when actually they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
They want the right to say what they want to say, but they don't want the right for me to carry like I want to carry. And it's a contradiction of terms by all means.
Hey, John, I know we didn't discuss this, but have you been following this 3D gun making process?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, now the news of the day now is you've got these lawsuits from these states that are very anti-Second Amendment, and they think it's going to be some sort of Armageddon, and so the blueprint defense distributors, the blueprint's now been taken down offline because of the lawsuit until they can straighten this out. But you still got, they say thousands of people worldwide have already downloaded the blueprints so they could, 3D print their own guns. And I just think, that is a level of freedom that I find fascinating. If people could be able to construct their own devices to protect themselves, I say more power to them.
Well, my honest opinion on that is I think this is much ado about nothing. I really think there's a lot. This is probably part of the leftist group trying to make a big stink about something that's really not a big deal at all. Probably the same thing was made 200 years ago when some of the handguns that are made now were coming into production. The material, I don't think that's really a big deal. I haven't yet seen any kind of plastic bullets. Well, I guess we do have Nerf guns, but nevertheless, of course, the extremists jump to, well, they'll be able to hide them better, blah, blah, blah. I just don't see all that. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's a great idea. I personally don't think I can afford anything like this because, from what I'm understanding, 3D machines are exponentially expensive, and so I don't see myself ever being involved in it. But I think it's a cool idea, and it's definitely part of the Second Amendment. Anybody that would stand against this cannot say they are pro 2A.
Yeah, I think
again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what, as the price of 3D printers and the materials go down, is to see what cool inventions people are going to come out with, like cool new ways. The firearms. I think firearms might even be rethought to some extent. You just never know what an American can do in his garage. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. Well, Paul, again, this is exactly where they were how many hundred years ago when they started making repeater firearms. Oh my goodness, you can shoot more than one. That will cause all kinds of trouble. And look where we are. It's all good. I think it's a ploy.
So, John, we talked a little bit about. Now, I want to tell everybody you're a pastor. We talked on the phone yesterday about this, and I thought your story was fascinating. I mean, because you're named after John Calvin. Is John Calvin Martin? So, your parents. I mean, they gave you this name, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct. But there was no correlation at all to the famous John Calvin, other than, and after we talked, I got to think about this. Other than my mom and dad may have been prophetic and didn't know it.
Yeah.
Because the famous John Calvin was a reformer. He was someone who rebelled against the system, and I have that nature somewhat. So, but now, in all honesty, I think it's a good thing not to necessarily be a rebellious person, but to stand for what's right, even if it comes to the form of rebellion. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 1, when sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And I was preaching a youth camp years ago, and I told them, I said, what you need to do is rebel against wrong. Be a good rebel. So hopefully my name, John Calvin, is I'm following those footsteps instead of a rebel without a cause. I would like to be a rebel with a cause.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. And John, I would just echo. I would say, you said, maybe it was prophetic that your parents named you John Calvin. I say absolutely. I think God knew what your name was before it was your name. So
I do too. I do too, my friend.
That's certainly right up the reformer John Calvin's alley. But hey, I appreciate it, John Calvin Martin. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and good luck with the Southeast Arkansas chapter.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for what you're doing, buddy.
All righty. You have a great day.
Have a great day.
Folks,